Welcome, welcome, welcome to the launch event for the American Planning Association Asian and Pacific Islander Interest Group. 4 months ago, APA officially recognized our interest group. I'm Hing Wong, and I'm serving as the chair. Before becoming an APA division, we start out as an interest group to build up our base. There are no membership fees or dues in being an interest group member. We have an energetic steering committee and leadership team. There is a slide at the end of this program which lists these members. As an interest group, we would like to increase the number of Asians and Pacific Islanders in planning and support them in their career development. Provide a forum for planners to better understand the needs and desires of Asian and Pacific Islander communities, and build a diverse network for all planners to share their experiences and ideas relating to Asian and Pacific Islander communities. We have an exciting program for you today. In just a few minutes, our APA President, Leo R. Ashishun Jr. will give opening remarks. Our featured speaker will be an inspiring conversation with Chancee Martorell, founder and executive director of the Thai Community Development Center, who is a planner, activist, and community organizer.
Sorry, Hing, that slide is not advancing. So why don't you just continue on, Hing?
Okay.
The slide is not advancing.
Yes. During the second half of today's program, we'll provide a summary of our newly formed membership, have you take a quick 3-question poll, and then have breakout groups for networking and gathering comments on how this group can support APA and Asian and Pacific Islander planners and communities. The first half of our event is being recorded. 1 CM credit has been approved. So at this time, I'd like to introduce our APA president, Leo R. Ashishun Jr.
Thanks. Thanks, Hing. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome from Honolulu, Hawaii, where I reside and I work. But on behalf of the APA Board of Directors and our organization's leadership, I wish to extend our congratulations and welcome to the newly established Asian and Pacific Islander Interest Group. As you know, or even if you don't, one of APA's strategic initiatives for the next 18 months is to prioritize equity, diversity, and inclusion in everything that we do in the organization. Thus, the establishment of the Asian and Pacific Islander Interest Group is very, very timely. And it is my hope that this interest group involves not only Asian and Pacific Islander APA members such as yourselves, but the wider community of planners, decision makers, community leaders, and many others that are themselves Asian or Pacific Islanders, or at least interested in our perspectives. It is also my hope that the association will be able to call upon you to volunteer on the many committees, task forces, and activities that we have slated for the upcoming year and beyond. According to the 2020 census, there are over 23 million Asian and Pacific Islanders in the United States, with those who identify as Chinese, Asian Indian, Filipino, Vietnamese, Korean, and Japanese leading the way for the Asian population, and Native Hawaiians, Samoans, and Guamanians or Chamorros leading the Pacific Islander population. These 23 million individuals make up 7% of the US population. And moreover, the Asian and Pacific Islander population in the United States has grown by 5% over the past 2 years, while the overall US population has grown just 0.5% over the same period. The population of Asian and Pacific Islanders are highly urbanized, with 75% living in metropolitan areas with a population greater than 2.5 million, and largely situated in the United States, but certainly they are across the nation. At the same time, AAPI is underrepresented in several large urban areas. I point to these statistics to emphasize the importance of the Asian and Pacific Islander community in the United States, and that we are a population segment that should not be ignored. I reflect back, and actions over the past number of years, and more so over the past 2 years, have greatly impacted the AAPI community. And the inequities and injustices upon the AAPI community have been devastating in some instances. As planners, we need to ensure that such inequities and injustice are addressed, not only for the Asian and Pacific Islander community, but for all communities that we work with or work for. There is much to be done, and planners need to lead in order to achieve great communities for all. Again, congratulations to the Asian and Pacific Islander Interest Group, and welcome to the APA family. We look forward to collaborating with you in the years to come, and to see this entity become a division in the near future. Happy holidays to all of you, to you and yours. Thanks a lot. Heng?
Thank you, Leo. At this time, I'd like to introduce Tiffany Mara, who is our membership and social media director, and she will be having a conversation with Chancee Martorell. Tiffany?
Thanks, Heng. So without further ado, it is my pleasure to introduce to you Chancee Martorell, a woman who has personally inspired and mentored me throughout my planning career. Based out of Los Angeles, California, Chancee studied urban planning at UCLA, which I'll forgive as a USC Trojan, and has built a planning career in community organizing and the nonprofit sector, with many years of service on the Central LA Planning Commission. So Chancee has been a social activist for more than 30 years. She's an advocate, urban planner, and community leader dedicated to Thai immigrant and local communities. So she's a respected practitioner in community development and a leading expert on modern day slavery, and the founder and current executive director of the Thai Community Development Center, the Thai CDC, which has a special place in my heart as my first planning job. I was a volunteer at the Thai CDC in college, and I'm half Thai, so part of my community as well. And we'll get started with Chancee by asking her a series of questions and learning a little bit about her. So when we're through with our back and forth, then we have some time for Q&A at the end. So Chancee, welcome. I wanted to start by having you discuss what your interests, values, role models, and life experiences are that led you to pursue a career in urban planning and education in urban planning.
Sure. Well, thank you for that very touching introduction, Tippy. And I certainly miss Tippy. She holds a very soft spot in my heart because she's like the daughter I never had. I have 2 grown sons, and they're Amerasian. So Tippy, thank you for that warm introduction. And I am very honored to be here and to have been invited to be part of this program, as part of the Asian, I guess, cohort of the American Planning Association. So thank you for having me. Regarding the first question, Tippy, well, first of all, what has really inspired me, informed me, and why I'm where I'm at and doing what I'm doing really stems from being an immigrant myself. I'm a Thai immigrant who grew up in Los Angeles and continue to reside here in Los Angeles. My parents immigrated here with us, my sister and I, to Los Angeles, and they became part of the low-wage sector of the economy as low-wage workers here in Los Angeles. working in multiple jobs throughout their working life. And I grew up in the inner city of LA, in a very multi-ethnic immigrant neighborhood. We had Latino friends and Korean friends growing up and going to school. So that whole immigrant experience certainly informed me, and I got to witness firsthand the struggles of newcomers and immigrants like my parents. And I ended up having to really like provide some like interpreting and advocacy on behalf of my parents as a little girl, you know, helping them navigate two worlds, you know, because this world was so new to them and unfamiliar to them. And I myself, being still young, not understanding what's going on, ended up having to like translate, for example, for my parents. And so I grew up very fast and sort of became already like a service provider at the very beginning. But then later on, the LA Unified School District, as part of their school integration program, then started busing all of the inner city kids out to the valley and other parts of the suburban areas of LA to integrate the kids of color into a more predominantly white community. And that was a culture shock. That really was a very alienating experience for me, and led me to see just the disparity between the folks like me and my friends living in the inner city and the folks out in the suburbs, and just how affluent they were. And I then began to see how the city was really not one that is equitable. You've got the folks living in the city who had no access to parks and green space and any services, and the infrastructure was a lot poorer. The housing was dilapidated and in disrepair. And then you go out to the suburbs and you've got a lot of greenery and a lot of resources and a built environment that was just better and just more conducive to you know, just a very comfortable life. And so I saw that, and it was so glaring. I felt compelled to then become like an advocate that would really keep folks really aware and make them aware of the needs and the plight of immigrants and especially those who are economically disadvantaged in inner city, like my parents, and not just help them really make a successful cultural adjustment, but integrate them economically and socially. And so, yeah, so then I got very involved, even in high school, and very civically minded. I received the opportunity to be appointed by my city council person from the inner city neighborhood to the City of Los Angeles City Council for youth. So we became, those of us who were part of this, became youth advisory council members under then Mayor Bradley, representing our council district and becoming an advisor to city council and the mayor around youth related issues. And so that kind of then really sparked my love for community service, for volunteerism, and then also politicized me in a way so that I could really see how through political representation, we could address the needs of communities. And so we, ended up as Youth Advisory Council members, not just being advisors to the city on youth-related issues like teen pregnancy, substance abuse, gang violence, juvenile delinquency, and what have you, but we also ended up actually being employed in the city as well if we were interested in continuing on that track. So I ended up then working for Mayor Bradley, and then for City Council member Mike Wu, and then later on for Congress member Mel Levine, and then before that for State Assembly John Vasconcellos at the state capitol. And all this while I ended up going to UCLA as an undergrad, majoring in urban planning. And so, I mean, not in urban planning, in political science, because I didn't do urban planning until my graduate work. And so until my graduate level. But yeah, so that kind of was the impetus for me. And then the opportunity to be a youth council member really just then got me in that direction to just get very involved. So
how did you make the switch from political science into urban planning?
Right. So then it was a result of my work in the political space that I became quickly disenchanted with the just a lot of the corruption I was seeing all around, regardless of which party you're affiliated with, because, you know, you began to see that it's all about power and political expediency, and you end up trading your principles for political expediency. And so I saw that firsthand, especially at the time when I was working for Congress, and it was the early 90s, and we essentially were going to go to war with Iraq in the first Persian Gulf War at the time. And folks were clamoring to authorize the use of force and support a war where there was no basis and what have you. And so in any case, I saw all of that going on and how decisions were arrived at. And I then decided that because I thought if I were to really empower a community like the Thai community, that's like a minor minority and that is so voiceless and invisible and so marginalized, that perhaps I myself would one day, run for office and be able to kind of represent people like the immigrants in the Thai community who need some kind of a voice or representation to advocate for them. But then when I saw the politicking and trading principles over political expediency, I decided that was totally not for me. I then went to study abroad, actually in Thailand. And during my study abroad at the Chiang Mai University, I actually was interested in going back to Thailand and pursuing a degree in international development, in third world development, and hoping to go back to Thailand to do like rural development and go into the poor parts of Thailand, the provinces, to really develop those impoverished areas. But then, so then I ended up coming back to the States and going to grad school at UCLA and doing my degree in urban planning with an emphasis in regional international development, hoping that I would then return to Thailand to apply that. But then I guess it wasn't like I had an epiphany and, had a vision that I would then start Thai CDC, but then the civil unrest in Los Angeles occurred. And then that was in 1992. I think all of you may have heard of that. And then in 1994, we were struck by the Northridge earthquake. So both disasters or crisis left devastation in their wake, and really had adverse impacts on the Thai community and left them displaced from their homes, their jobs, and their businesses. And yet there were no service providers with the linguistic cultural competency to serve Thai immigrants who are disadvantaged and limited English proficient. And so that then led to the birth and founding of Thai CDC. And so then I've been here ever since. So.
Thanks for that rundown of your career, Chancee. I know some of these things I don't think I've even known. So it was really great to hear your story. To move the discussion more towards social justice and your planning work in the field, what suggestions do you have on how the planning profession and this API interest group specifically can advance social justice issues for API communities?
Yes, very good question. Well, you know, first of all, when Thai CDC was founded as a result of these disasters and crises, and we had to do all this emergency relief and resettlement assistance because no one was stepping up to the plate. There was just this vacuum and lack of, you know, services and provision of services that were linguistically and culturally appropriate. We then came to understand that this community was really having difficulty overcoming its invisibility factor because a lot of policymakers and elected officials just did not render us as having any significance because we lack the political clout and you know, a lot of Thais being more recent immigrants compared to the other Asian Pacific Islander ethnic communities don't vote as much, and even when they're registered to vote or eligible to vote. And so we could get easily bypassed when resources come down the pipeline or funding come down the pipeline. And so, so it was important for us to make our presence known and to really make sure that the powers that be knew that we exist, that we occupy space associated with history. And that's why we then began the campaign to designate East Hollywood a historic port of entry for newly arrived Thai immigrants going back to the 50s, designating that neighborhood as Thai Town, which after a 7-year-long protracted campaign, we were successful in obtaining the municipal designation for. And so Thai CDC then does its work around community development, economic development, creative placemaking, cultural tourism, and affordable housing and small business development and what have you. But, you know, that while that is going to help build up a community and render us more visible, and is an opportunity to allow, you know, that will allow Thais to assert its community consciousness and allow it to engage in the community building process. Justice is also, because it's something that I feel very passionately about and that I've sought after all my life, regardless of the price. So I hope that by the end of what I'm going to say, this will give you something to think about so that all of us could, you know, and some of you can make some fundamental choices in your life and gain a new perspective on your work as to, you know, what you are part of in this never-ending struggle for justice. Because when all is said and done, whoever you are, wherever you are, whatever you may be doing, each and every one of us, we have the freedom to choose every day of our lives how we want to see justice achieved. And so my question is, are you willing to pay that price for justice? Because justice isn't free. Nothing worth having in life is ever free. And there are a few things that are as rare and fleeting as true justice. So ultimately, I would hope that you would choose unwavering principle over political expediency, discomfort over comfort, sacrifice over privilege, change over the status quo, and action over complacency, but above all, social justice as whatever the price. Because, you know, Thai CDC, while we're doing all of this community development as the core pillar of our work, to try to engage in community asset building and in individual asset building to raise the standard of living for poor immigrants, Thais, and other individuals who are poor and families who are poor, and improve their quality of life. Because this will at least help them become economically more mobile and self-sufficient. While this is the core pillar, we also find ourselves having to, if we want to really see justice, having to advocate for immigrant rights, workers' rights, and human rights. And hence why Tippy had mentioned the reason why we had to take on the heinous crime and the scourge known as human trafficking and modern day slavery, because unfortunately a lot of the foreign national victims are disproportionately Thai nationals. We've worked on dozens of human slavery and human trafficking cases involving Thai nationals in the thousands. We're talking about labor trafficking and sex trafficking. And so Thai CDC has become like this kind of ecosystem for social change. So it's become like not just a community development center that's broadly defining community development and that is comprehensive, but it's an ecosystem too, because we're addressing the need for economic self-sufficiency and access to economic opportunity. And then we're addressing human rights violations and trying to make people whole again and make sure they get redress and restitution. That's a form of justice. But we're also involved in a lot of policy advocacy. So trying to get pieces of legislation passed that will make affordable housing a right, that will make healthcare a right, that will make basically planning, especially planning, more accessible to people who are maybe limited English proficient, who doesn't understand planning, to democratize planning, the planning process, and to help communities really take control over their neighborhoods and be able to fight catalytic developments that can gentrify their neighborhood and displace them. And that will then really adversely impact the social fiber of that community. So yeah, that's, and then, one of the things I like to refer back to is what legendary Asian American activist Grace Lee Boggs talked about. She said that while we're looking at ourselves and reordering our priorities to save this country, this neighborhood, this community from any profound spiritual and material crisis, we really need to then undergo this kind of very deep spiritual reflection and shift our priorities if we want civil rights, if we want equality, if we want peace, and if we want justice.
Thank you, Chancey. That was beautifully said. To build on that conversation, and I think you probably answered part of this, but if you have more to add, how can planners elevate social justice, equity, and inclusion considerations into their everyday planning practice? Especially, I guess we'll do a survey after, but I think most planners in the APA are public sector planners, and I don't know if you have any advice on how we can bring more of that into our jobs.
Right. So, as a community development practitioner for almost 30 years and as a trained planner for like almost 30 years, and then as a former planning commissioner for 9 years, which was an appointment by the mayor that was, unpaid, uncompensated, just so you know. It's not like I was having two different jobs because I still run Thai CDC. I kind of come to planning with a totally different lens. And that lens is a lens around equity and justice and inclusion and diversity. You know, because of my own background and life experience, and because of what TITC actually sees firsthand on the ground when we're talking about the plight of the poor. And so you know, for planners who are doing planning, we need to make sure that it's grounded on the needs of the community, and then also on what you know, and also providing an opportunity for the community to actually provide that input into any kind of planning that occurs, because you know, their voice, after all, is the voice that should be paramount. That would really I mean, it's a matter of justice that they are the voice around any planning, because it affects whatever planning is done, affects them, you know, the people who live there, work there, do business there. And so, for example, when I was on the planning commission, right, you've got developers coming to present their projects, and using my community lens, the first thing I'm going to think of is, well, how is that project affecting that community and the demographics of the community? If they're primarily made up of you know, low-income renters, and they're coming into the community proposing all this luxury rate, market rate housing, what's going to happen to those renters, right? Are there going to be units built by developers that would be low income to replace anything that they take out? You know, so, you know, as a community basically oriented planner, and on that commission, I then would, for example, ask that, you know, that the developers make some concessions and like do a covenant agreement with our housing department to ensure that 20% of those units are going to be low income, you know, so that folks aren't going to get displaced. So if planners are going to come from the lens of equity and social justice, you have to be constantly thinking of you know, your actions and your decisions, and whether it's going to be for the benefit of the community as a whole, and then how to mitigate any negative impacts, of course, on the community. I think I'm telling folks everything you already know because you guys are planners, but I think we need to strive to continue to press for equity. Like if we're in a transit-oriented community, are we pressing for equitable transit-oriented community? The Metropolitan Transit Authority, do they have like an equity you know, platform, you know, to work off of? You know, should we be pushing for that, so that anything that's built around the public transit, which is a public infrastructure that should be a public asset because it's funded by public dollars, should then be producing public benefits? So are they planning within the radius of the transit-oriented community, affordable housing, open space, making it more walkable, amenities, community space, greenery, all of that? So that's, you know, so we need to kind of always use equity in our deliberations, in our planning.
Thanks for that, Chancey. I think we're moving into our Q&A time. So if anybody has questions for Chancey that you'd like to ask, feel free to either drop it in the chat or raise your hand, since we have, you know, our Zoom meeting format, and then we can ask some questions of Chancey here. I think it's really rare to find planners who operate in community development on the nonprofit level. So I find what you do so admirable. I think it's too easy to just do our jobs in, the private sector, the public sector, and then keep our heads down when we have a unique role in these communities to do everything that you described.
Yeah, I just want to say that access is very important and democratizing the planning process. A lot of folks, immigrants especially, don't understand what that is. So it's like planning 101 is needed in those communities, but then making it accessible in their languages, like public hearings and all of that. They have to be accessible. You've got to provide, interpreters and planners, when you go out and into the field or send out mailers about public hearings, etc. They have to be multiple languages. And then, you have to go out and meet the community where they're at and make sure they understand the process so that they can actually be involved in the process and that they understand, the ramifications of those projects, that are coming into the neighborhood, et cetera. So, so there's got to be folks on the ground. And that's why TICC is sort of like the gatekeeper, between like to protect the community while organizing the community so that they could be able to really lead the efforts as well and be their, the voice for their community, so we facilitate that process.
Yeah, absolutely. So it looks like we do have a question. Is it Anandita Mitra?
Yes,
right?
thanks, Tippy.
Yeah.
Chancee, I really enjoyed your presentation. You really remind all of us that planning is not just about the latest fancy building, but also about people. And I think the planning profession has forgotten that one of the reasons we're here is actually to serve people. And if you look at most of the comprehensive plans these days, they're all focused on the next big real estate development and bringing in the next big improvement. And often that entails relocating and displacing people of color, and primarily the lower income population. One of the comments I wanted to make, and that I'm using that in all my equity work and talk, is that, the 10% inclusionary zoning standards that we have, it's so disingenuous because we should actually change that to 10% above average median households. So 10% of a development should cater to those, that are above 150% of the average median household than the other way around, because to be honest, 50% of our population live below average median household. So I don't know who came up with this number, but it wasn't based on scientific facts. So in your work, I hope your organization starts advocating for a greater percentage of affordable units. 10% is just laughable. And what's happening right now, and it's a huge issue, I know, in most of Asia, definitely was an issue in India and still is an issue in India, is speculation around the housing market, where, a lot of the developments and housing that gets built stay empty because people buy it as an investment, and how can we disassociate housing from actually commercial development? Like housing is, there's a big campaign in India 20 years, 30 years back, like housing as a right. It's not the next developer's big portfolio item. It's actually a service to the community. So really those housing projects need to feel and look and work for the community than for the developer.
Perfect statement there, because TICC is actually part of a number of coalitions that's trying to protect housing, especially for the low income, very low income, who are at 35 to 50% of the area median income, and really trying to also address the homelessness crisis in the process. So we, all of the coalitions that we're part of, Housing Now, Renters Day LA, we are trying to push for right now legislation in the state of California that makes housing a form of public good. So it should be social housing. We're calling to call housing social housing, and we're trying to decommodify housing and makes housing a right. And so anytime, we are proposing affordable units, we're proposing affordable units in a grand scale, not the 10%. That's just a drop in the bucket. And so for us, it's the 3 Ps. It's like preservation of existing housing stock, especially rent control housing and units, and then production of more affordable housing, and then protection of tenants, and then also regulating the short-term rentals like Airbnbs that where Wall Street has come in to purchase a lot of rent control buildings and turn them into micro hotels and displacing a lot of low-income tenants. So we're like operating at multiple fronts in terms of trying to do those 3 Ps to protect the tenants and produce more housing and to preserve existing housing stock. But
I think along those lines, what's gaining momentum across the country is not allowing the purchase of single family homes by corporations, that they should only be bought by single family owners.
Right.
Because that was the big outcome of the housing fiasco,
Exactly.
These commercial property owners came in and just bought up all these houses that went under.
Right. And then they're not part of the neighborhood, not part
that
of
should be made illegal. And I heard that one city might be Vancouver, BC, but I can get you that information. So that's kind of the momentum that's being built around affordable housing, is get the, commercial properties out of there.
Yes. And so we're trying to decommodify housing here as well, and trying to call for social housing, which has been done in like Scandinavian countries. They have social housing.
Yes.
Yes. Thank you for this discussion. We actually have 2 more questions and
Okay.
about 5 minutes left.
Okay.
And we want to get to them really quickly, Chancee. The first one comes from Todd, and I believe he's also half Thai. And we have a lot of Thai planners.
That's cool.
He asked, do you have an example of how the Thai CDC has collaborated with one or more other CDCs for a common goal?
Oh, absolutely. Thai CDC, we actually collaborate with many organizations in different spaces, like in the social justice space, in the workers' rights space, immigrant rights space, and in the community development space and the small business development space. So in community development space, if you're talking about API orgs, yes, we have partnerships and collaborations with Little Tokyo Service Center, CDC, with the Search to Involve Filipino Americans, with the Koreatown Youth and Community Center, with United Cambodian Community, with Chinatown Service Center, with PACE, Pacific Asian Consortium in Employment, with so many API. And then after all, Thai CDC in 1998, together with executive directors of the other Asian CDCs in LA, like Little Tokyo Service Center, Pacific Asian Consortiums in Employment, and Thai CDC, we in 1998 co-founded the National Coalition for Asian Pacific Community Development, which is based in Washington, D.C. and Oakland. So they are our community development organization that's leading all of the efforts in DC, like through policy advocacy and just lobbying to get funding and resources basically to API communities throughout the country, and not just on the mainland, but off the mainland too, in Hawaii as well. And we're helping start up also CDCs throughout the country that's working in Asian communities so that they can address poverty, because we believe community development is also a vehicle for economic self-sufficiency and poverty alleviation. And so if there's poverty in API communities, community development is a key to that in uplifting the plight of the poor. And so we have been, TICC itself has helped other community development, help other communities start community development corporations as well. So.
Yes, thank you for that, Chancey. We have one last question for you. I think this is a really great question as well, from Vanitha. She says, may I ask, how do you increase advocacy for API populations in rural areas? I think we tend to overlook those who live in these communities.
Yeah, that's a really great question. We don't operate in a rural area. We're in city of LA. It's far from rural. So, so I've not had that experience of working in rural setting. I would have had I left the US and gone back to Thailand and do the rural development that I was planning to do, had it not been for that two crises that struck, the Northridge earthquake and before that the civil unrest. But yeah, I do have friends and folks I know, through all these fellowship programs that I've been through, where it's so true, because they work in rural communities like of Arkansas and, various parts of the US where there's, like all these needs in rural communities. And I have found, from my conversation with them, that it's been a struggle for them to get that shift, in terms of focus from policymakers and elected officials to like really ensuring that the rural communities get like the attention they deserve and the resources that they deserve. So I think the task for you would be to really like get in the face of all the policymakers and elected officials and make sure that they don't discount the rural communities and that they actually get resources out to the rural communities because these folks are suffering and they have a lot of unmet needs, and if resources are dedicated solely to urban areas, you're not going to be able to really then have a healthy community with adequate infrastructure and resources and access to economic opportunities, educational opportunities, etc. We can't have like two worlds here in this country. It's already a country of growing economic and social inequalities and disparity, and the wealth gap just continues to grow and grow, as well as the income gap. And if we don't really address the rural communities, that's just going to exacerbate the disparity even more, because you tend to see and find more poverty in the rural communities as well.
Well, thank you, Chancey. I think that's all the time that we have allotted today, but I'm so grateful for you. So thank you so much for coming. I know it's on Zoom, but I'm sure everybody will give you a big round of applause. It was really great to hear from you, Chancey. Thank you for being here.
Oh, well, you're very welcome. Such a privilege, such an honor.